Yes, it's a Senate hearing, and it is a culmination of years of investigation. And I think the news had already been tightening around Fauci, I would say, for the last couple of months. But now, just in the days before the hearing, there was a tranche of documents including Fauci's own diaries from the pandemic era, which I think made it impossible for him to testify without perjuring himself. So that I see is the main cause of this dramatic turn of events. So yes, Fauci took the fifth over 100 times to every question by the Senate.
We have Jari Kuikanmäki, who has published a very topical book, Origins of Coronavirus, and we discussed that in US Senate, Anthony Fauci, in the middle of the COVID pandemic, was writing diaries, and Rand Paul got hold of it and published it, and it's very it's criminating against him, and it also ties up very nicely with your freshly tied book. I'm not quite sure whether he's Anthony Fauci is a bad guy or just an egoistic bit player. But Jari Kuikanmäki, please introduce yourself and also your book.
So I'm a journalist, a podcaster with some background in the Finnish national television also, and now an author. And yes, for a true crime author, it's always nice when the cover character of your book bleeds the fifth over 100 times a couple of weeks after your book comes out to print. So yeah, it has been very dramatic couple of weeks now.
And you have studied in the London, and rightly you said you have been in the Finnish broadcast television. You have, by the way, also interviewed me there in the Alpha television, so that was very nice. There's still something about the linear television, even though the channels like us are taking the market share.
Mm. Oh yeah, it has its own energy when you're doing it live, and yeah, definitely.
But this topic, I'm a little bit doubting the Finnish media is interviewing you at the primetime live television to discuss the mistakes we made during all those coronavirus COVID-19 years. It somehow is just like it's a gray area in our history, and the linear media didn't handle it well. The politicians didn't handle it well, and there was lots of cover-ups. So you said this is it's a detective story. So this tells about how, excuse my French, how fucked up everything was on those times.
Yes.
But let's start in the first topic, origins of the coronavirus. So was it some crazy bat wet market stuff, or was it a lab leak?
So yeah, it is, as you said, this is a procedural, like a detective story. So I just start from the kind of first day I heard of the virus in January 2020, and then take the reader through the process of how we discovered all this evidence. And in the process, it also became not just a question of where the virus came from, but also, as the subtitle says, it's about the cover-up of the century also. So not only where did it come from, but how has it taken so long that we are only now, 6 years later, learning all the sordid details of what took place.
But I have to insist, I guess the crime scene is Wuhan, China, but wet market, lab leak.
It's not a wet market. I can spoil that much now as my informed opinion, having investigated the matter for a number of years. So to use this kind of legal terminology, I would say that it is beyond a reasonable doubt that the origin of the virus is research related. It is not a natural zoonotic jump, but I let the readers look at the evidence and draw their own conclusions.
And we have Anthony Fauci in the middle of it, and on his diaries he's also juggling with these two balls. But then he, for some crazy reason, decides with the US authorities and global authorities, World Health Organization, that let's go for this wet market story. And for a brief period of time, it was also forbidden to talk about lab leak.
And what is really shocking of the new Fauci diary revelations is that we are learning now the timeline that Fauci in his own private diaries already concluded in January 2020 that the market is not the origin. So, and then after that, he started putting together those research papers, or the teams who would write basically all of our essential scientific peer-reviewed papers, starting with the proximal origin of SARS-CoV-2, to promote this wet market theory, which Fauci himself did not believe.
Yeah, and then there's this fascinating scene, Wuhan, China, and America. I mean, we have books like China, America, or the kind of this two-headed beast, China and USA working together. But it still mind boggles in this kind of bioweapon research. How did the two countries cooperate?
Yeah, it is crazy. Like the truth is really stranger than fiction. That if you had tried to pitch me this story a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have believed a word of it. That it just cannot be true. But all the evidence just kept pointing to these very troubling collaborations in Wuhan that involved both the Chinese side, the American side, international scientists from different countries, but also crucially the militaries of both from the Chinese side, the PLA, and the Academy of Military Medical Sciences, and also Pentagon from the US side, and various other agencies involved in this. I mean, depends who you ask, what do you want to call it. Some talk about gain of function research, others just say that that's like a shorthand for basically bioweapons research or biodefense research of that kind. But the end result is the creation of dangerous pathogens in the laboratories in Wuhan.
And potential cure for them, as they say, we're just studying for a cure.
And I mean, there may be some truth to that notion as well. But then the question becomes that are the risks worth the rewards? And this was in fact the gain of function debate that was already going on in the early 2010s with the publication of Ron Fouchier's paper on the avian flu, and that already sparked the gain of function debate back then, because that study, which was done in Netherlands, already received funding from Fauci's NIAID then, and that chain of events then led to the gain of function moratorium, a ban on federal funding of certain kinds of dangerous gain of function research, which then led partially to the outsourcing of such research into places like Wuhan, China.
Yeah, you mentioned NIAID, and then there's a USAID. Then you have Anthony Fauci in the capacity of the US government.
Yes,
and but he's connected to these organizations.
Yes, so he's he was the longest serving director of the NIAID, which is the Infectious Diseases and Allergies institution under the NIH, which is the National Institutes of Health, which is the broader umbrella consisting of many of these agencies. And so Fauci has been there a long time, since the 1980s, but really in this capacity, his role grew, and NIAID's role grew significantly after the 9/11 and the anthrax letter attacks, and that's when the biodefense boom really started. The budgets became huge, and there was a proliferation of these kinds of labs and this kind of research. And then we had the first SARS epidemic soon after, and so that's the kind of background. So he has really been this kind of czar of this kind of civilian biodefense. So it seemingly civilian. It sounds very, almost boring, some like allergy and things like that. But in reality, it has deep military connections and biodefense connections.
Mm. Yeah, and then there's the totalitarian aspect of it, which all the governments jumped with the glee, and aided by World Health Organization. I remember vividly at the time, we are recording this in Finland, but we took the very strict line with Krista Kiuru, guaranteeing the biggest area, Uusimaa, in now we can say needlessly. At the same time, in the Sweden, we had this Tegnell who was proposing kind of what looked to me then like a reckless society. Individual freedoms, let's not overly use guarantees. Let's take the death toll of the older people, which is inevitable in the beginning, but then it will smoothen out. And the public line was that was totally reckless, and the kind of the totalitarian response taken by every other country in the world, China, USA, Finland, was that strict guarantees, mandatory vaccinations. We even had this vaccination pass. I remember going to Norway and they wouldn't have let me in if I hadn't had the 2 vaccination shots. And then of course China continued that long after everybody else had quit and gone to the Swedish line, and they really used this total isolation and like a totalitarian checking and doing all the logistics, so that that was fascinating, and it had its backslash as well, so there was something good coming from that, but it looked on the hindsight like completely overblown.
Yes, we have, of course, I guess primarily we have the death toll from the pandemic, tens of millions of lives lost and counting, all the illness that came with it, but also all the secondary effects of the lockdowns and economic effects on civil liberties, all in all. So all these ripple effects are still happening. What I would say of those early months of the pandemic, that like now looking through all the documents, all the evidence, it does still, some people insist that there was this very great plan in place, and there were some plans in place in terms of how the governments and the intergovernmental organizations react, but there was also lots of chaos, so that it was quite improvised for many parts, and all these internal documents also show it. Part of the reason of that may be also that the pathogen in question, the SARS-CoV-2, is quite special in its properties. So whatever plans they had in place, epidemiological models, for example, turned out to be wrong for reasons that most people at the time could not have known.
But then you also recovered, we discussed that there was logged in reports from Wuhan, and which were logged in the medical database, which were matching the virus blueprint quite nicely. And had those been used fully, we would have probably had a much better response using the data, but that for some reason it was put under embargo and only several years later released. And you had a bit of a Twitter or X discussion around that.
Yes, so that is actually one of the big questions when we talk about a cover-up, is that who were involved, when were they involved? So that now we know, for example, on the Origins investigation, we have now whistleblowers coming forward from agencies like CIA and saying that, we already knew in the agency, let's say around 2021, or some agencies maybe later in 2020, that probably we are looking at a research-related origin. But we still have quite a bit of opacity in those early days and weeks and months, that when did they really know, and would that have made a difference? And I think it's somewhat quite disturbing, some of the evidence looking at that. Both people in China and also some of the international researchers might have known about this already in 2019.
Yeah, but then we had the stuff like is it airborne, and this whole mask craze, everybody was wearing the masks, and it looks to that had we correctly used the already mapped genetic properties of the virus, we would have got a pretty good grasp of it. Maybe it's not airborne, maybe this is the most efficient way to handle it, and maybe in the background that data was transferred to Moderna and who developed the RNA vaccine and so on, but looked like the policy response was completely random. For years.
Yes, and absolutely, if one looks at the kind of research that was being conducted in Wuhan, so had there been transparency there, that response would have been different. We would have understood the properties of the virus, the furin cleavage site, how it operates, and so that it's very optimized to infect humans. In fact, it infects humans better than any other mammals, better than bats, which is a very unusual, to say the least, for this kind of supposed zoonotic jump. So it came like straight out the gates. It was ready to infect humans and be airborne, and many would say that it was designed for those properties.
But then, if there was this red herring of the crazy bats, and so it sounded a bit like the AIDS came from apes, who some gay people were fucking. Or so excuse my crude language here, but it sounded like a let's invent this crazy theory about bats and wet market, and how did that become like the truth?
So essentially, the first cluster, or this kind of first known cluster of early COVID cases, was traced and located on this Huanan seafood market in central Wuhan in around middle December or so, 2019. And then the wet market was closed, disinfected in early January 2020, and then it sort of went from there. But it seems very probable now, with the evidence we know, that there was a cover-up in the Chinese side in terms of the virus sequences of those early index patients, that we now know with quite good confidence that the patient zero of the pandemic was not in that marketplace, so that the virus came into that marketplace earlier, the spread started earlier. But it became dominant due to actions of also people like Anthony Fauci in the West, as well as the CCP and that local cover-up response. So I think it was a cover story from the beginning, but then not everybody who was proposing it were necessarily in on the cover-up, but like they were, I think, misled by...
What about patient zero? Are any of the Chinese people in the original lab alive, and did you get hold of the Chinese sources for your book?
No, there's there would be very little point in trying to contact them, but we do have some their retelling of some of the events. U.S. intelligence has at least suggested, they haven't proven, that some of the early clusters of patients with symptoms consistent with COVID-19 would have been working inside the Wuhan Institute of Virology, but that has not been verified. But yeah, we do have some interesting stories from some of the people inside, and it all those tend to be very inconsistent when you start looking at the gaps of the stories from people like Shisheng Li, for example, from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, who was the main collaborator with organizations like EcoHealth Alliance and Ralph Baric from University of North Carolina, and then the US side. So their stories really do not add up. But then again, under the circumstances, they may not be at liberty to say what they know. Then there was also the case of Zhou Yuzhen, the vaccine developer, the first person to file a SARS-CoV-2 vaccine patent in China, and he died somewhere around May-June 2020, and that has never been disclosed. Many people would suggest that it happened under suspicious circumstances, let's say.
Mm. Yeah, and this official institutions, I mean, all these health organizations working, and what about is the World Health Organization? Was that part of the loop, or they just took the lead of the U.S. institutions?
Yeah, unfortunately, the World Health Organization is swayed quite powerfully by the two big players that are now most tangled in the Wuhan research, that being the United States and China. Mm-hmm. So, for example, one of the ways in which the WHO origin investigation started going wrong very early on was the nomination of the president of the EcoHealth Alliance, Peter Daszak, into their origin investigation team, the international team that arrived in Wuhan in January 2021, and who basically said that, there's no reason to investigate this lab leak theory further, when in fact Peter Daszak would be among the prime suspects had it been a lab leak in Wuhan. He was deeply involved in both the virus collection programs, among them also the closest known relative virus of SARS-CoV-2 called RATG13, which was announced around February 2020. So that virus was collected from a copper mine in Yunnan and then brought to Wuhan over a 1,500 kilometer distance. So that's like a 4-hour flight by plane with US taxpayer money by people like Peter Daszak and Shisheng Li. Furthermore, Peter Daszak was also involved with the Pentagon in the DARPA Defuse proposal, which was leaked then in 2021, which included the genetic engineering of these viruses in Wuhan with the US military money, and it was very, very detailed proposal of inserting the furin cleavage sites into the backbones of these viruses. And then behold, 2 years after such a proposal was written, then a virus with a unique furin cleavage site emerges right next to the laboratories in which they plan to do exactly that.
I read a book about DARPA when the electric cars and self-driving cars were being developed, and I got good vibes of the DARPA as an organization, but when you combine DARPA with Defuse, I mean, maybe that's something less nice. Is that like one of the key players?
Yeah, I think what DARPA said then when the Defuse leaked, it was leaked by a whistleblower inside DARPA in the autumn of 2021. Major Murphy leaked it. So that in itself is a cover-up, because that, of course, DARPA had been holding on to that proposal with very incriminating details about the kind of research that was planned in Wuhan, and they'd been holding on it for the first year and a half into the pandemic, into the origin investigation. So that means that DARPA and other US federal agencies and other branches of military in some capacity and intelligence agencies were to some extent involved in this cover-up of this crucial evidence. Now, whether because DARPA did not then fund the proposal, they said that it is too risky, but they knew about the plans. So what exactly is DARPA's complicity in it is still unknown. But the Defuse proposal outlines in disturbing detail the kind of direction that the virus research was going in Wuhan. And it is possible, some would say even probable, that perhaps elements of the Chinese military, for example, the Academy of Military Medical Sciences, took some of those elements, some of those ideas, and then went ahead and tried it.
Yeah, then about the virus, so it has some pedigree on these lab developments and earlier viruses, and like you said, it's remarkably well adjusted for human population. But the good thing was it wasn't very lethal. So I had one guest, Thomas Malinen, who compared it to the Spanish flu 100 years earlier, and that was more deadly, but the waves get milder quite quickly.
Yes, so. that is true. So if it has this super property, it is the infectivity, and combined with the fact that the symptoms, the patients can be asymptomatic for a longer period, which gives it the pandemic potential. Like if you compare it to the first SARS virus, which was way more deadlier, but then it had luckily it had the property that let's say the viral shedding took place at a much later stage of when the symptoms had already appeared. So you could actually, quarantines actually worked, and they were able to. It was around, what did they have, 8,000, something like that. SARS cases, the first one, and then compared with the billions we now had with this one. But it's true that the lethality is luckily much lower.
Yeah, now that we know, or at least strongly suspect, it's all lab engineered, even without proper AI, artificial intelligence. One thinks that it would be just a matter of relatively simple tinkering to increase the lethality and just keep the other nice properties of spreading intact, and that would be a much harder case, because we have, excuse my French, fucked up the system, because now nobody believes the system anymore.
Yes, it is a very, very disturbing scenario, that what we now saw with the SARS-CoV-2, that it might have just been like a kind of like an exercise run for something much worse in the future. And that's also why I think as a society, we have to take this, for example, this gain of function research risks now very seriously, and also all the advances in the synthetic biology, and now combine that with the AI, so that can be a really existential question for all mankind.
Is there were all kinds of variants, and it kind of the timeline, I guess, is like roughly by the end of 2019 to, was it 2022? In my mind, kind of is hazy on these things, but by the end of 2021, there was already a milder variants. But there was like was it Omicron or Delta? Delta was the bit more nasty variant, and then the last kind of a smooth variant was Omicron, which kind of smoothed it nicely out of the population.
Yes.
But was there something to be learned on those like variants which came after the first COVID-19? And was some of those like engineered by man-made efforts?
There has been some interesting theories. So that's the thing with some of these laboratory techniques and the synthetic virologies, that you can really get into these rabbit holes, and that's part of the kind of paranoia also that we can see also from the literature, both on the US side and the Chinese side on the biodefense, that already like in the early 2000s, they were very aware of the fact that it may become very difficult to detect whether or not a virus has been somehow tampered with in a laboratory or not. And some perpetrator, by intention or just by accident, it could be, let's say, research-related or vaccine development-related leak. So some variant could come out, and we wouldn't even necessarily know whether or not it's of natural or origin or not. But I suppose, I'm not an epidemiologist, but I suppose that those later variants behaved somewhat as might be expected in terms of becoming milder.
And then I guess the vaccination itself, I remember there was like a Russian vaccination and Chinese vaccination, and then there was the AstraZeneca one, and then there was the Moderna RNA, which was the real breakthrough. And I remember thinking lucky me, my mother got this AstraZeneca crap, but I got this cool RNA modern like a CRISPR technology, and I felt good about that. But any reflections on those vaccines, or were they a sideshow or their development? You mentioned that some Chinese guy patented the early version. Maybe that was blueprint for the Chinese vaccination.
Yeah, so that's the kind of double-edged sword with this whole vaccine research. So there are some these quite disturbing timelines of the vaccine R&D in terms of that. So Yusen's case was one. Just days ago, we had those Fauci emails released, and or his diaries released rather, and in one of them he was very disturbed to have learned in around June 2020 of a Chinese research paper that was describing the use of humanized H2 mice. And the problem with the paper was that the mice were in the paper 30-week-old, and Fauci kind of, he can do basic arithmetic, and then he started checking that, wait a minute, why did the Chinese start breeding these mice in late summer, early autumn of 2019? It's quite a disturbing question.
Yeah.
There could be those kinds of connections, as well as some very troubling questions of incentives in the risks of these kinds of research. So if you have, say, vaccine R&D development that is risky and may cause a pandemic, and then that same industry profits if a pandemic takes place, then that's not a very good incentive structure, even if nobody intended it to be that way.
Yeah. Now, because of this, we get all kinds of dry runs or test cases, and of course tens of millions people died, and it's all tragic, and it's very hard to kind of find the bad guys. And even Fauci, he strikes me as a kind of egoistic guy who enjoys being in the limelight and just being the mastermind and the source of truth in this middle of the global thing, and everybody looks up to him. But it's still kind of my mind is still a little bit not made on that. Was he just a bit of a fool or evil?
Yeah, I start my book with an epigraph. I might read it out loud.
Sure.
I selected this already when I started writing it, and it goes like this: there are no secrets about the world of nature. There are secrets about the thoughts and intentions of men. And the source of the quote is the father of the atomic bomb, J. Robert Oppenheimer. And I think when writing this book, that was a recurring thought in my mind, trying to understand that what were these people thinking? Who is the good guy here? Who is the bad guy? Or is it areas of gray? So I think there's some quite Shakespearean drama. I think high stakes. You can see the pressure that is put on people, whether it's science administrators or the scientists, and they have to make these judgment calls. In terms of Fauci, though, I am starting to lean in the more in the villain category. Some of his actions, he was not only was he aware that the wet market is not the origin, but that the emails from him show that he was actively involved in the cover up, because he had funded the gain-of-function research in Wuhan starting in 2014 with a grant to the EcoHealth Alliance, and the emails show that he was already covering it up in January 2020, and his diaries show him quite enjoying the public limelight and how important he is now and how everybody likes him. At the same time, he's doing this quite self-serving acts. So one gets this very two-faced portrait of what his diaries show and what the records show, and then how he liked to be perceived in the public eye.
Yeah, and it's remarkable how there was this global coordination with the World Health Organization and all the national entities, but how kind of scaringly totalitarian each country reacted. For example, like I mentioned in Sweden, I have a Finnish friends who live in Sweden, and I was wondering, because the Finnish narrative was that they are completely crazy and irresponsible, and Tegnell is just the evil guy who lets Swedes die, and they just sacrificing for human lives for the economic altar of people being able to have dinners in the social settings. And I said, can't you guys see? And then we had the Finnish reality was left-wing government with the Krista Kiuru and DHL, our health organization, kind of having half-hearted debate where sort of once you should wear masks, and then it wasn't quite clear, and we should definitely guarantee, and nobody should go to restaurants, and let's just go to the full totalitarianism, and just I'm a little bit exaggerating, but let's go the full vaccination cards and restrictions on the travel and international movements. And then we had the U.S. situation where you have a Trump in power and Fauci still keeping through every government, and then the Democrats coming over and they flipping the positions on these masks and guarantees from one state to another. But in each country there was the local truth, and people were very scarily obedient to that truth. And the truth in each different country were just isolated installations. So that was fascination, and nobody has done a post-mortem on these crazy times what we could learn from this kind of mass psychosis.
Yes. Yes, I think it is one of these things we would all like to think that we are these individuals and we think for ourselves, and we are not swayed by these kind of primal emotions or mass psychology, but that clearly is not true. So yeah,
and it was not like I said, China took it much longer than all the rest. So I was wondering when it was clear that it's over and you shouldn't guarantee, and they were still continuing on, and it looked like they wanted to go to the full end of the social experiment of can we control the people in good totalitarian fashion.
And I think there was some disturbing convergence between the Chinese model and even some Western countries that we pride ourselves in the civil liberties and these kinds of things. But in some respects, there was some bit too much resemblance, let's say.
Yeah, and I remember Spotify banning COVID-19. So you mentioned that then the episode didn't spread, and there was YouTube also canceling, and then all the social medias were like we mentioned at some point it was illegal to talk about Lap League.
Yes, they
or illegal, but it was de facto social media death.
Yeah, like Facebook, who even went to the lengths of banning, mentioning the idea that the virus may be engineered, so they would just remove that content, and they said so. But this is just this reinventing or trying to reinvent the wheel of the basic concept of the freedom of speech and the dangers of this kind of pre-censorship, whether it's done directly by government or somebody who is kind of doing the bidding of the government. But it seems that we never learned the basic lesson why it is so dangerous, that who tells the fact checkers the facts. So that's why we have to make sure that we don't repeat that mistake.
Yeah, and then there was social media. I remember Brett Weinstein and Joe Rogan doing this, was it ivermectin or some other, like a horse animal health drug, and that was probably just a complete bullshit sort of dead end as well. And at the same time, the RNA vaccinations probably worked, and they were the best science at the time, and science was kind of settled on that, and it was logical to follow that part of the official track and taking the vaccinations and trying to sort of minimize your chances of catching the infection. But then again, looks like it mainly hit older people over 70 years old, and then you get long COVID and all kinds of other effects from the vaccination. The guarantees mental health problems. So I mean, truth is the best disinfectant, but I don't know, when nobody knows what the truth is, then will the completely free speech and crazy theories be the right way? But I guess at least you get the ideas in some probability out, and then it's up to you to make the judgment what is the truth.
Yeah, I mean, we've tried the model that the government tells what the truth is, and that is not a good model. And I also that there is this very detrimental effect to the trust in science, trust in public health authorities now. But and that is, I think we would need to go to the root causes of what is causing that. That, for example, if we have like public health authorities like Anthony Fauci, who are these two-faced people, then no wonder that people lose the trust, even when the advice is the correct one. But how would normal people know when are the authorities lying, when are they telling the truth? So that will be one of these ripple effects also of this whole origins cover-up debacle, that we will now have a generation of people who will not trust the public health authorities.
Yeah, now for good or mostly worse, we have done the crying the wolf test, and we have tried to sort of trust the government, and it didn't look good. So let's say if somebody now does the more lethal and true dangerous variant of COVID-21 or whatever fuck it is called, then it's then we have screwed the system. Like then even if the government or the science is settled in the next time around, then we will have a very different trust reaction to the government guidance.
Yes, and I think that has been one of these, maybe one of the motivations for these kind of cover-ups going as long as they have, that people have kind of justified this kind of noble lie that, let's try to keep the mistakes out of sight so that people would not lose the trust.
And also people's favorite politicians have picked one side, and like I said, I mean, people change the sides. So like Republicans were thinking one way, and then when they were in the opposition they were thinking the other way. So they were not like a consistent line that only Democrats wore masks and they were idiots and so on. And the same thing in Finland. Nobody wants to do post-mortem because we had this lovely left-wing government who was just doing their best, and nobody wants to remember all the mistakes which were made because it's embarrassing and their favorite politicians would look bad. And so there's also media is having a lot of trouble on this, because there were a lot of articles written on very much certainty that this is the truth and this is what you must do and these are the right people, and if you don't agree 100%, you are idiot and dangerous and probably some right-wing lunatic.
Yes. I mean, undoubtedly, this was among the worst media failures of at least my lifetime. But we will have this ahead of us. We have to come face to face with what happened. For example, in Finland, we still have no official investigation or even interest in the origin question, for example, and many other pandemic era policies. but that is unsustainable. Like sooner or later, we have to come, face to face with the facts.
Yeah, and people had such a strong conviction. They were like really, I had a lot of friends who were absolutely 100% convinced that this is the way to do. And I remember myself doing episodes throughout the pandemic, and I had struggled. I actually had very few masked episodes, but I just had a bigger distance between me and the guests on that. But a lot of people were really, really paranoid on what to do and what to say, and also I as a sort of podcaster and a YouTube emerging publisher, I was really worried all the time that I might get cancelled and lose the whole platform. So that was a really silencing effect.
Yeah, chilling effect.
Chilling effect, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm even myself. Like I didn't start out on this journey with like very hard set. Like a set of convictions that I already knew from early on that, this is how it is or something. I was definitely wrong about things along the way and had to really like revise my worldview. I took the scientists at their word, say early 2020 when they said that, this cannot be research related, that we have ruled it out. I looked at, okay, here's prestigious scientists saying this. They seem to be, wearing white lab coats and like they have degrees, and like who am I to disagree? So yeah, I think one has to kind of be able to revise their convictions if the evidence went somewhere else.
What was your vaccination history? Like I said, I get two Moderna shots. But
I got my vaccines as well. Yeah. I don't know, was it a good idea? I haven't really like.
Yeah, but I remember like I tried to get into like the favorable place in the queue because it was kind of a honorable thing to do it early and so on. Then I think I got twice the COVID, so I at least got the same. I got 2 recorded tests that said that I still had the COVID. So but both were mild variants, so I skipped the Delta, so I got the Omicron, which was nothing. So it was just a bit of a flu.
But yeah, I don't know. Like there is this like one shouldn't also get all this like contrarian worldviews as like a set.
Yeah,
it's the same as with this like very conformist worldview that you just believe everything you read in the paper.
Sure.
But then there's the kind of the opposite or the corollary of that is not necessarily the way to go either. That not every conspiracy theory is true, even if some are.
Yeah, but it was hard time. I remember I took our kid from the school illegally 1 week early, just because it was clear it's spreading and the system wasn't guaranteeing. So I took the liberty of going against the rules in that way, in that judgment, that end. But then in the other end, then I was just starting to think that this is like looks like maybe the technical was more right than I thought, and then I was on that end of the things and started thinking that this is like stupid that we are so strongly always believing the authorities. Like in the beginning of it was like no, everybody goes to school and no, you shouldn't do anything individually unless you are absolutely told what to do, and you should be wearing masks or not wearing masks and whatever, and taking the shots and not traveling and taking your record in the pan European vaccination database, so you can travel to Norway, and it was crazy times. But now most of my friends who were really fanatic one way or other, I had some friends who were also in the kind of this is crazy and you shouldn't vaccinate at all, and everybody should just get the natural immunity and almost like willingly get the virus, and that's the way to get it through. So, but nobody wants to talk about that, and just everybody feels just a little bit ashamed about it.
Yeah, and I suppose also like just like exhausted and tired about it. So there is this thing that it was very like extraordinary time. Then I suppose like many people just don't want to think about it too much, or it's there is this kind of wariness that comes in, and I think that's also eventually we have to get like a historical record straight of what really happened.
Yeah, and surely you have some wisdom what we can learn from this. Now it's scary to think that if and when this was man-made and lab generated, maybe for noble purposes of just trying to find a preventive cure for this awful viruses which had been deadly in the earlier manifestations. Now we have AI, we have a completely different global coordination. I mean, USA and China are no longer friends. Europeans don't trust Americans. All the trust is lost a lot of the trust is lost in the official institutions. But we have a super powerful artificial intelligence. So what now?
It's scary times. Definitely we should try to implement, if we can, some kind of proliferation ban in the similar sense as with nuclear weapons earlier. I mean, we have the bioweapons treaty, but it seems it's very outdated. It's from the 70s, banning the development of biological weapons, but it's so full of loopholes that in practice it's not very well enforced, and I think that we would need to get all sides to understand that what are the risks for everybody here, and try to work out some kind of a solution that we would stop dangerous gain-of-function research. There was just an announcement from US that they're putting more of a federal ban there on the certain kinds of dangerous gain-of-function research, because the risks of it clearly outweigh the benefits. So I think that whole doctrine that for example Fauci and NIAID were proposing in the early 2010s, that just is wrong. So that would be in everyone's benefit. Now whether those superpowers can see face to face and figure that out, I don't know, and then throw the AI in the mix. So it is very precarious times we're living in, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and with war and international conflict still in the agenda. I mean, if you look on the Ukrainian and Russian fight, we are past the Terminator age, I think. So we're seeing self-guided weapons and drones in particular, and Ukraine has been sort of developed remarkable drone capability where they're now burning the Russian department store storages and the oil infrastructure, and then I think they are now moving this year in the ground troops where the artificial intelligence will do the killing. So now you would think if you're Russia or something like that, well, if you have a low morals anyway, why not go this way? So I think unfortunately this is still a kind of the game theory problem where the global ban doesn't look like a very likely solution.
Yes, and also I think the biological weapons have very particular problems, like the attribution that, for example, you may not know who the attacker is, and that makes all these game theories quite difficult.
Yeah, and then on the other hand, the artificial intelligence, I use it super heavily myself, so I think it's this kind of the game theory problem that if USA and Europe slows down, then China will just keep going. So there's no point kind of stopping, because you just take yourself out of the game. And we now seeing with the closed models like Anthropic and OpenAI that the US government was kind of toying with the idea, let's only give the Americans these best models, and it failed. And now there seems to be a consortium that we should have the open source models more available. So you can just sort of regulate the paid models, and if you are going open source, then it's by definition auditable. So, but it's powerful. So I think we have the same shit here. I mean, you can do the biological research and on the closed circles, but I don't know if that's a good idea. So
yeah, I don't remember who said it. Was it Peter Thiel, or it might have been him, that he said that, you know, sometimes when he doesn't know how to, you know, solve a problem, at least he will try to talk about the problem. That, you know, that's maybe it's a bit like this crutch, but like that's maybe something where we can, you know, even if we don't have the answers, that we kind of start thinking about that, you know, what could the solutions be, and what are the right questions to ask, and the right problems to focus on.
Maybe about the book. So this is an English language book available in Amazon in the hard
paperback and Kindle versions on Amazon's worldwide. So it's Origins of Coronavirus, Wuhan, the secret research that sparked the pandemic and the cover-up of the century. And I have it's based on like bit over 400 sources there also on the book website, all linked.
So our interview with Anthony Fauci, no doubt.
I think he will be pleading the fifth from now on.
Yeah.
But yeah, so everything in the book is, you know, it's not some, you know, opinion book. Everything is, you know, fact, can be checked, and I'm quite optimistic that, you know, whatever open questions remain after having researched this couple of years, and, you know, it's like a remarkable group of people all around the world who have been on this for years, and I chronicle some of their achievements here as well. But you know, I'm quite confident that we will solve this. That whatever the open questions are, we will get the answers.
Yeah, I think this is now Anthony Fauci pleading the fifth. I mean, we won't get too much information from him, I guess, because he's just stonewalling. But this is feels like a kind of a political fight in the USA, because it kind of gives a bit of a breathing room for the Republicans from the Iran fiasco, and then.
Although there is bipartisan support. Yeah. On the origin question, so that it's not so much. It's maybe leaning more on the Republican side, but it's not as bipartisan of an issue as many others are. But yes, definitely this is like an earthquake moment when Fauci pled the fifth, and there would be so many avenues where this investigation would be going if the DOJ started it. There has already been, for example, Fauci's advisor, Dr. David Morens. He was indicted and arrested on May on conspiracy charges, as well as destruction and concealment of federal records. It's also in the I already covered his misdeeds in the book before that happened, so that was kind of gratifying to see or hear about the SWAT at his door. So Ralph Barrick's research also, he announced a sudden retirement in May, and he's in federal department process as well, related to these things. So even though Fauci is not speaking, that doesn't mean that, you know, an investigation is not going forward. There's very, very many directions that it could now take.
Yeah, that's a good point that it's kind of shared by both aisles, and it's not so. It's in a disturbing way. It's a little bit like Epstein, like everybody, both parties had like people benefiting from that network, and now we have the kind of the Fauci standing decades in the system and being in the Trump administration and Biden administration, and it's just a sort of a constant everywhere. So I will see, but it's looks like it's American theater, and I think it will develop and hopefully uncover lots of uncomfortable truths.
Yes, and I mean, of course, one must say that like Americans, even though they have been now in kind of a bad light due to these Fauci revelations, they have still been, one could say, the most transparent in terms of trying to get to the bottom of this. So we get this kind of spotlight effect that, China has done worse things, but they don't have such transparency going on there. So that's the good side of the American system, that they still have some semblance of like a democratic oversight over this, and I would say that it's almost like more of this permanent bureaucracy or what President Dwight D. Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. So that once you build these budgets and these institutions and this kind of permanent bureaucracy and the kind of scientific technological elite, as he called them, it kind of takes a life on its own. And I think that's what has happened with some of this biodefense stuff. And now it's a question that whether the political system, the democratic system, can somehow tame it, get it under some oversight again.
Yeah, and we'll see. We are recording this in English. I do every now and then English episodes, but if I get the international non-Finnish audience, in particular, or Finns, I mean, would be good if you could comment on your recollections from those strange times when were you part of you were always cheering for the official line, and what was your thinking, and have you changed the thinking, or is this just you want to? What's your feel on this? I would appreciate if there would be a lively debate on this and on the international basis as well.
Yes, and go buy the book. It's on Amazon. It's a thrilling read, and it really reads like a detective story. So. Yeah.
And one of our sort of popular guests here, Matti Virtanen, is apparently working with you on the Finnish translation as well.
Yes, Matti helped edit this one, and we have the Finnish translation in the works as well.
Yeah, so we might do this again. Maybe we'll invite Matti as well to discuss this, because he's been publishing also other interesting books on the ääripäät, where he discussed the sort of political polarization and how that happened in Finland, and then he was also discussing the climate change, and I think it's good to have this Overton window. There might be one objective truth, but for sure, if you have a very narrow Overton window in the society where you're only allowed to speak about the perceived official truth, that's always a bad idea. And we see time and topic and genre after another, that it's a bad idea to lock in with too much certainty in one official answer.
Yes.
And but I think judging from your book, there's some untold stories here, but we can say categorically no to the wet market biological story, and yes to the lab leak and the sort of grandiose cover-ups and nefarious actions and incompetence. I guess those are the themes.
Go read the book and check the evidence. Like I'm really like happy for people to having their own theories and own views on it. Like just as it's like based on the evidence. So I'm not really even that interested in sort of convincing anybody of anything. That it's very evidence first.
And so thank you, Jari Kuikanmäki. I guess you hang on to in the X of Twitter mostly, and you have your own podcast as well. Yes,
so you can find me on social media on x.com/Jari Kuikanmäki. I have a website for the book also, jarikuikanmäki.com/origins. And then we have the Viidesvalta podcast with Otto Juote on YouTube.
Yeah, Otto is great. He has been here with me talking about various topics, and it's translated Fifth Estate. That's the political theories behind that. So actually, because you studied in London was it London School of Economics? And
yes, I did my master's there, Otto as well, and then undergraduate in Helsinki.
Yeah, so I think I have this thing inside episode. So I learned you had also studied Ronald Coase, and this is very topical about the AI economy because he's one of the great minds of the theory of the firm. And it's fascinating that we have the hierarchical entities called firms or limited liability companies where you use the you have bosses and subordinates and tasks, and the reason for that, according one theory, is that because the transactional costs are very low inside the organization, because you have the bosses have right to boss around the employees, and they have the obligatory duty to work because they get the salary. Now the artificial intelligence is breaking that, and I think we could go to the inside episode to discuss how will AI reshape the modern cooperation and androidization of humans and corporations and artificial intelligence. I think let's do that. Thank you, Jari Kuikanmäki, and like you said, buy the book.
Oh, thank you. Great being here.
See you in the inside episode area. Thanks.